A Jamaican woman has stepped forward who I can verify to you knew Kamala's grandma Beryl. And she remembers her affectionately, by the way. Apparently, Grandma Beryl was a wonderful woman. She adored Kamala's grandma Beryl. It was just one minor detail that was off. You see, the Beryl that she knew, the one that Kamala presented in her book, was not her, because the Beryl she knew was white. All I did was conduct basic Black people science. I looked at this photo here, the photo that Kamala put in her book of her and Grandma Beryl, and I said, no. Scientific consensus rejects this theory for a ton of reasons. One of them being, I just didn't feel like this woman was her grandma. I have a Caribbean grandma. They're all up in your face. I don't feel the affection in this photo. I'm not thinking this is a very dark woman. I'm not thinking this is the mother of Donald Harris at all. Like, I know genetics can be funky, but I was going, this woman does not look like she owned and operated a store. There were so many things that were throwing me off. Even the whole story of the grandparents owning all of these stores. I'm going, what are you talking about? 1914 to 1938 in Jamaica. But we were just getting out of slave chains. And you're telling me like your family just became like so dominant and we're running these dry goods stores and this grandma had that. Something was off, okay? And what was off was just the photos they were presenting. These people were too Black. And then once we started looking into it, the fact that her campaign just shut off the tap on speaking about her Blackness. They just wanted to move on as if she had never said it. It was the entire brand. Remember, that's the pitch. She's going to be the first Black female president of the United States. The media was trying to sell that, to force feed that to us. And I said, Black scientific theory says, no, this ain't your grandma. But I was receiving a ton of emails from people that were insisting that Beryl was Kamala's grandmother. Among the emails were a flurry of people suggesting that I speak to a woman known as Lady Colin Campbell. She also goes as Lady C. I'm familiar with her work. I've seen her. She's written in the Daily Mail before, or has been written about in the Daily Mail. She's a British Jamaican author and a socialite who grew up in Jamaica. And she is deep on genealogy. She's written several books regarding the British royals. This woman likes history. She likes facts. And someone had sent me a clip of her from her YouTube channel during which she was fielding questions and people were asking her to look into my research into Kamala Harris. And she said, rather offhandedly, that she had asked around and that she had a friend that was on the island who had confirmed to her that Beryl was, in fact, Kamala's grandmother, seemingly putting to rest all of my theories. But I remained completely undeterred, and I just ignored it. Lady C said that she was hoping to host that friend on her podcast in the future, and that the woman would spill all of the tea on how she knew Kamala's grandmother, Beryl. So I just waited. I waited for the future to arrive, and guess what? The future has arrived. And as promised, Lady C hosted Dorothy, that's the woman's name, Dorothy, the woman who knew Grandma Beryl. And I will tell you, the conversation did not go as Lady C expected. I think primarily because people who did not watch every episode of this series into Kamala were not quite understanding what we were uncovering. There were all of these people making response videos. I was going, you clearly did not watch everything that we're doing. We never said that Beryl did not exist. We always believed that Beryl existed. We simply did not believe that the woman that was presented in Kamala's book was her. We believed that this was a case of stolen identity. Essentially, there was a Beryl, but the woman that was being pictured was not the grandma, and they were playing funny business like commies do, switching identities. And it was strange that even though Kamala presented a picture of Grandma Beryl in the book, she didn't mention her at all in the book. What's up with that? You're just trying to blackify yourself. Well, Lady C likes research. Lady C was good on her word. She hosted Dorothy. So let's watch the first part of their conversation. This is Dorothy, again, the Jamaican woman who grew up and knew Grandma Beryl, Miss Beryl, personally. Take a listen.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. We have a special guest with us today, Dorothy Otti, who is an old friend of mine. She's Jamaican, and she used to know Miss Beryl very well. They grew up in the same village.
Well, I grew up in the village where Miss Beryl lived. She was a lot older than me, of course.
Well, obviously,
and Miss Beryl is the grandmother of Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yes.
And she was just the most delightful lady. I have such fond memories of her. Excuse me. So there's a sweet that you have in Jamaica as a child, or grown-ups eat the sweet that's made from coconuts and caramelized sugar, and it's called a buster. Have you ever had?
Darling, in my day it was called Bustamante Backbone.
Okay, so it was called a buster. And Miss Beryl had a shop. And in the mornings, my Uncle Cecil would take me by the hand. We'd go up the road for a walk. And on the way, everyone that goes past, it would be, "Good morning, Mas Cecil. And how are you, Miss Dar?" And by the time we got to Miss Beryl's shop, she would either offer me a buster or this other delicious sweet called a paradise plum.
Yes, I remember Paradise.
Yeah,
Plums.
but Miss Beryl, she was just so lovely. We would have these conversations as a little girl whenever I went past with Uncle Cecil, and it was always, "How are you doing with your books? Are you reading? Are you learning your times table?" Of course, she was a businesswoman, so she was very good at things like mathematics, of course. And she was, looking back now, you could see she was a trailblazer. Because the shop that she had, she actually built it herself. So we lived in a village, and her shop was the only what you would call an upstairs, downstairs house. All the other houses were like bungalows on one level with gardens and stuff. I remember in our garden, we had gladiolas.
Okay, a couple of things flagged to me as interesting there. So she was really good at mathematics. Okay, so we're talking about a Black person. Again, this would not have been more than a couple of decades removed from slavery. And she was really good at mathematics, extremely well-read, owned and operated a shop, and had the biggest house. I mean, what are we talking about? This doesn't feel like the correct kind of a Black story that I'm used to. A couple of generations ago, you go back, most Black people have my grandparents' sharecropping farm. I mean, maybe, who knows? I'm like, okay. Very clearly, though, we know she's telling the truth right away, because this is a good fact check against what Donald Terrace wrote when he wrote a story about their Jamaican heritage for Jamaican Online Global. And he talked about those bustas. He talked about him and his sister Enid and how they loved the bustas. I think he said it was around Easter time. So everything she's saying sounds correct. But it was this part, this next part, that instantly let me know that this woman was the real deal, because she presents a detail, something that I know to be a fact that I had not ever presented to the public. Remember when I told you that I got on the phone with a family member of Kamala Harris? And that family member told me that Donald Harris had two siblings, Enid Harris, who I have spoken to you guys about, and another sibling who I had never mentioned, was Beryl's son, and his name was Kenneth. And this woman starts speaking about the Kenneth that I had never mentioned, who would be Donald Harris's brother. Take a listen.
Was it a village or was it a hamlet? How many people would have been in it? How many houses? How many residents?
So at one time, everyone that lived there, was a village. There was probably about 80 or 90 people. But at one time, everyone that lived there was a relative of mine.
Really?
Yes.
What about Miss Beryl?
So this would have been before people such as Miss Beryl moved there. But before that, everyone who lived there, and even as a child growing up, most of the residents were connected in some way on my mother's father's side, my grandfather's side, where they were all related. But Miss Beryl, my darling, also had a son. He was called Kenneth, and Kenneth had a motorbike, the equivalent of what we would now call a Harley Davidson. And of course, so at the time I would have been no more than 4 or 5. I'm not interested in what make your bike is. And he would put me on the front of the bike, whenever I came past with Uncle Cecil, and I would sit there and he would switch the engine on. And of course, looking back now, I realize the bike never moved, but he just held on to me, and I thought I was riding a bike, and I grew up absolutely loving motorbikes. He was very handsome.
Oh, Beryl must have had some money. Her son has the equivalent of a Harley Davidson. He was very handsome. He's got riding around on his motorbike. What are we talking about here? Like I said, this is when I knew that this woman was dialed in, because I had never spoken about Kenneth publicly, not for any particular reason. I just literally hadn't gotten around to it as I've been collecting all of this evidence to present to the public on Kamala's family and looking into Enid and looking into Kenneth. So very interesting. Again, sounds like this Beryl had a lot of money. It's just not giving the person that is pictured in Kamala's book. Now, of course, naturally, Kamala Harris then comes up in this conversation. And Dorothy keeps this same positive energy. She's very positive, right? She has a spirit about her. She has this fond memory. Delightful. She's delightful in her approach about Beryl. And she's delightful in her approach about Kamala and Kamala's features. She really likes Kamala's facial features. I'll tell you why. Take a listen.
And Miss Beryl, by the way, I see Vice President Harris on the box, and I sit up straight and I think, my God, she looks so much like Miss Beryl. Her facial features, the only thing is Miss Beryl was much smaller in stature, but
Well, okay, Miss Beryl, because Kamala is very fair-skinned.
Right.
Was Beryl fair-skinned?
yes, she was.
She was?
She was. She was fair-skinned.
She was? Okay.
Yes, she was very fair-skinned.
Oh.
With black hair.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So she was so fair-skinned that now that I'm older and I can spot people by their skin coloring, etc., for me, I would say there was something Irish there.
How interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say somewhere along the line, she would have had ancestors that were Irish. Yes.
Actually, can I show you a photograph
Of course.
of an old lady?
Yes.
And some people speculate that this is Miss Beryl.
Right.
So, sorry, bear
That's
with me.
okay.
I am so untechnological.
Okay.
It's just pathetic.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Nah, that's not Miss Beryl.
That's not Miss
That's
Beryl.
definitely not Miss Beryl.
Okay.
That's not Miss Beryl.
So,
And-
let me just show you.
Yeah.
So,
That is not Miss Beryl.
That's not Miss Beryl.
Definitely not Miss Beryl.
okay.
And I know what she looks like. I couldn't have been in a dream, and she definitely did not look like that.
There's another person, but could that be Miss Beryl?
No, that's not
That's
Miss
not Miss Beryl
That's not
either.
Miss Beryl either.
Okay.
Don't know who that is.
Okay.
That's not Miss Beryl. That ain't Miss Beryl. You know, as you were describing the fair skin and looking like Kamala, I was thinking this can't be the Miss Beryl grandma that's in Kamala's book. And clearly you see Lady C's going, wait, fair skin? What? Maybe is this? Nope, that's not Miss Beryl. I didn't dream. That's not Miss Beryl. Yeah, that sounds about right. You're saying Irish. And that's funny because Judge Joe Brown had a very distinct memory that Donald Harris told him that he was Irish and Hindu. And things are starting to add up, not in Kamala Harris's favor. And I don't know what to say here. My distaste for a woman who borrowed a black person for her autobiography so that she could secure the black vote. Do you understand how fundamentally racist that is? Do you understand how despicable that is? I mean, you have to be the worst kind of political vermin to borrow a black person to put in your book to present to the public as your grandma, who definitively was not your white Irish grandma. And if my instincts are correct, the person that she is showing is indeed someone she knows and is likely, like I said from the very beginning, the help. The help who would have taken on the name of the people who they worked for. It's very common. This is why you talk about having slave names. You take on the last name, the first name. When we saw that woman who was listed looking for a housekeeper position that said Beryl or Christie, it is my suspicion that this was the help, meaning this was likely the woman that was working for the wealthy Miss Beryl who was buying her children Harley Davidsons. I mean, it's just, this is unbelievable. This should end her chances at the White House. If we have any sort of moral sensibility in this country, you would never allow a person like this to assume office. Because if she is willing to lie like this, if she is willing to, this is essentially the worst kind of blackface, okay? This is what you are seeing now. Kamala Harris is, in fact, a minstrel show. She said, I'm running for president. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm just going to blackify myself. Fake aunties, fake uncle photos. Oh, I actually just called them. What is she going to say to this? Is she going to come out now and say, oh, when I said Grandma Beryl, I meant like that's just what we called her affectionately, Grandma Beryl, as she was doing our laundry. Megan Thee Stallion, I'm calling you every person who twerked, danced, applauded, said to the public, this is a black woman. It is now incumbent upon you to take a step back, examine what we have revealed, and to take it back. Take everything you said back about this woman. Apologize for platforming her, for believing this. It's fine. I'll accept the apology, but keep the exact same energy. Oh, she's black? Okay. Now that you know that she's not, you should be angry, and you should present these facts to the public and to your followers and to your fan base. And Lady C was similarly shocked, gobsmacked, as she put it. Take a listen.
I'm gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. And it then begs the question, did she seriously think she was going to be able to get away with this?
She did.
I mean, I know Candace Owens has been going hell for leather on this. And Candace Owens is clearly black. So this is not about anti-blackness. Because, as you could see, Dorothy is not white. So, I mean, I'm just stunned that any ambitious politician would present as a grandparent of hers, and Kamala Harris is very fair-skinned. Whether she calls herself black or brown, she's still fair-skinned. But she definitely has black blood. So to that extent, it's not anything artificial. What does seem to be extraordinary is the creation of a black grandmother when her grandmother was of color but wasn't black. And she just, did she get somebody off the street and pop them in the photograph? Was it a helper? Who was this woman? I mean, it boggles the imagination.
Don't you worry. Leave it with me, Lady C. From one Lady C to another, I'm going to get to the bottom of who that woman is in the picture, and I'm going to get to the bottom of who the Irish Beryl actually is, because here's what happens now. Blood is in the water, my friends, okay? If you watch the full interview, you should cut over to Lady C's YouTube channel and watch the entire thing. That woman gave a ton of accidental clues about the Irish Beryl that we are now looking for. She excelled at mathematics. She built a home. She resembles Kamala Harris. She had black hair. She owned a store which specialized in making bustas. Now we can refocus our attention and look for the true Beryl, the white-looking Beryl. And we are going to be able to find that person. I sense it. Take a pause here and recognize how demented you have to be, okay, to approve the printing of a book with a photo featuring a photo of who you purport is your grandma Beryl. You standing next to a woman who was likely cleaning your dirty underwear. Okay, likely. That's what I think. I feel it in my soul that that's who these women were that were pictured in here. This woman doesn't recognize Iris. Grandma Iris was the second photo she showed. We zoomed in on it. She doesn't recognize anyone. Dorothy's going, I don't know who these people are. Okay, you have to be utterly demented, hell-bent on power. You will stop at nothing to achieve power if you have no shame. If you have no shame, knowing that you come from a long line of slave owners, that you would then appropriate the identity of a real Black woman so that you can what? Re-enslave Black people in America today. That's exactly why she's doing it. She is disturbed, okay? All around the world, we are getting tips. People that went to school with Barack Obama telling us things and saying, I don't want my name to be mentioned here, but just so you know, in his college yearbook, or I guess he said like in the college database, his name was Barry Soetoro, and then they changed it. But people that have spoken out about that have mysteriously gone missing. I mean, we are just learning a lot. And of course, there is the very real fact that I am in contact with members of Kamala's own family. You've noticed I have not shared their names. There's a reason for that. They are asking for some level of protection. She's got a lot of family members, a lot of white family members that just did not make her book, her treasure trove of BS. Kamala is completely lying about her heritage. She pulled the good old Barack Obama, dropped a book, an autobiography that was meant to legitimatize her to the Black public. And for whatever reason, in the public's mind, when somebody drops a book and calls it an autobiography, they just assume that somebody along the way did the due diligence and therefore it must all be true because they found it in the nonfiction segment of the bookstore, a section of the bookstore. And that's just not true. That leaves a lot of room for politicians to lie. And that's exactly what Kamala did. And you can really see when you go through this book that it is just political blackface. She fails to mention that she is majority white. She fails to mention her white family members, her many white family members. And she neglects to mention them entirely, by the way, while going through great pains to instead offer alternative Black relatives. Now, what am I talking about when I say alternative Black relatives? I mean, they are not her relatives, but she refers to them as uncles and aunts. I mean, as just one example, Uncle Freddie mentioned in two pictures. One picture here, visiting my Uncle Freddie in Harlem. Harlem, haha, get it, Black people, haha. I like Harlem. I like fried chicken. I like black-eyed peas. Yeah, and it turns out that guy in the background isn't even her Uncle Freddie. Harlem was always a magical place for me. Okay, cool. Then she mentions Uncle Freddie again. Here is her book. I'm blessed with an amazing family. Like anybody reading that objectively would assume this was her family. I'm blessed with an amazing family. I'll never be able to thank Auntie Chris, Uncle Freddie, and Aunt Mary enough for their constant encouragement and support. They always showed up for me, as they did here at a campaign event for my DA's race that we held at the San Francisco Jazz Club. Jazz Club, get it? Haha, Black people, you like jazz. There we are with my auntie and my uncles and my family. And she later in the book, there's like a little paragraph where she explains that actually Uncle Freddie and Aunt Mary are not her real uncles and are her real uncle and aunt at all, but they were just like family. But she doesn't say anything about that Aunt Chris she mentioned. She just says that Aunt Chris was the reason that she went to Howard. We don't know if it's a real aunt, one that we know for sure it's not a real aunt because all of these people are Black. The point was just to make people just believe that she had this extraordinarily Black experience. Even when she shows photos of her fully Indian grandparents, right, her mother's parents, she sort of gives it this little Black spin, like this photo of her maternal grandfather in Africa. Of course, here it is. Grandpa and me when we visited him and my grandmother in Lusaka, Zambia, right? So again, yes, this man traveled. Yes, he was on diplomatic missions. Why did you decide to pick this photo in Africa? Because it's sending a signal. She's trying to Blackify herself by every means, any means available to her. And she really has, by the way, kept up this charade since the book. In fact, yesterday, before our episode dropped, she made a poor decision to tweet this. She tweeted, "Growing up, our mother worked long hours, so my sister Maya and I would stay with our neighbor, Mrs. Shelton. She helped my mother take care of us, and we used to call her our second mother." So she has a Black second mother. She's got a fake Uncle Freddie. She's got a fake Aunt Mary. She's got a fake Auntie Chris. It's just unbelievable. It's just really unbelievable. And yet all of these real white aunties and uncles were completely ignored. They just didn't make it. And we now know that she had real relationships with these people. So it's quite stunning. It is a lie by omission. What is interesting is that so many people had emailed us right away, and these people are obviously, I'm not a techie. They were familiar with Photoshop. A lot of editors saying, Candace, these photos are Photoshopped. You can tell because in each photo of her grandparents, this one and of Iris Finnegan, they don't show the hands. And apparently there is something to do with hands that you can tell that they're just Photoshopping two pictures together. So the operating belief from the army of editors that have emailed us is that actually they took a real photo of Kamala and a real photo of this Black woman, and they just merged them together. And that's why you're not seeing any emotion or interaction between the two. Like, I don't know, I just feel like your grandma would put your arm around her or something. But again, that's a theory. We had more phone calls with Kamala's family members, and they have confirmed to us beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person that is pictured in Kamala's book is not the real Miss Beryl. Kamala cannot sue me for that statement. She cannot sue me for defamation. That is not the real Miss Beryl. That is not her grandma Beryl that is in that photo, okay? In fact, this family member tells me that not only is the real Miss Beryl light-skinned, like Kamala, but also that Miss Beryl had a sister, okay, that was even whiter than her, even lighter than her. Now, my understanding is that Miss Beryl looked to be mixed Indian and Irish. So they would say brown, they call Indians brown and Irish. So that's why when Dorothy recounts this, she's like, Kamala looks so much like her. Apparently she was a little lighter than Kamala, but you would look at Kamala and you might go, okay, that complexion, you would definitely say, could identify that as someone with an Indian complexion, no doubt. And this is, by the way, how we now know definitively that Dorothy is on the money. We are in communication one step closer to getting in touch with Dorothy. We're trying to get her on the show because she also confirmed that Miss Beryl did indeed have another sister that she remembered. Take a listen.
Miss Beryl was a brown-skinned woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
That says it all.
In fact, I remember her sister.
Uh-huh.
I also remember her sister. But yes, remember, as I say, I have, you look back on things in your childhood, and Miss Beryl, I have very fond memories of going back from I was a child. Lovely, a lovely, kind woman that lived in this house with her son.
And the son that she is referring to is Kenneth. We're going to talk more about him because this piece is actually really important for those of you who have joined our CIA investigation, our army of people who are looking into this. But Dorothy also confirmed, remember, we were between two death certificates, one that was in 95 and one that was in 1960. Well, she confirmed that Beryl was indeed alive in the 90s and that she passed a short time before Dorothy's husband, who I believe she said her husband passed in 2000 or 2002. Take a listen.
So was Miss Beryl alive in 2000?
So she was alive in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Which was when I Tim and I were together. So she was definitely alive in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yes.
That's really intriguing, Dorothy. What a pity you don't have a photograph.
I know, but I am still sort of making inquiries to see if anybody, has a photograph of her.
Someone has a photograph of her. That person is likely Kamala Harris. We're just not going to get it, obviously. And they're probably now freaking out and trying to figure out who else is speaking. Kenneth Harris. The reason I have kept sort of this enigma of Kenneth Harris is because it's been very difficult for us to find information on him. So now I'm going to open this up to the public, okay? Kenneth Harris is Donald Harris's full brother, okay? So Kenneth Harris and Donald Harris have the same mother and they have the same father. He is Kamala's full uncle. And the reason why he is a person of tremendous interest to me is because, like Donald, there seems to be very little public information available about him. Now, I have told you that the family members that we are speaking to say that Donald was exceedingly private and Kenneth was exceedingly private as well. They were a bit mysterious. They have also confirmed to me that Donald was a full full-fledged communist who attended frequent Marxist meetings and basically gave no information about himself ever. Okay, which is why it's of note that Dorothy says she didn't know Donald, but she definitely remembers Kenneth Harris. Take a listen.
I don't know her other son, who is Kamala's father. I know of him, but I have never met him. But of course, her other son, Uncle Kenneth, I have really loving, fun memories of him.
He lived in the village.
Yes, he lived with his mother.
And what became of him? Do you know?
He, as far as I know, he lives in America.
Okay.
Yes.
And Kamala's father.
Yes.
You didn't know.
I have never met him.
You know, it's really funny that in Kamala's book, she speaks about how she was visiting her Uncle Freddie in Harlem, because what I actually know, based on my research and what people are telling me, I can tell you this for a fact, is that Kenneth did indeed go to America. He went to New York. And then he virtually disappeared. So while she was at Harlem, she could have visited maybe her real uncle, Kenneth Harris, that she hasn't mentioned at all. But yes, I am now telling the public what we know about him. His name would be Kenneth Harris Sr., by the way. He has 3 children, and his son's name is Kenneth Harris Jr. My understanding is that after he went to America, after being quite private, he virtually disappeared. What we also know about Kenneth Harris is that while he lived in Jamaica, he was a police officer. So we are trying to crawl through the database and see if we can find any information on him. Quite interestingly, every single family member that we've tried to look things up on, we've been able to find, except for Kenneth and Donald Harris. That is just remarkable to me. Every indication that I have leads me to believe that these two were working for the government. And I'm not talking about like just working for the government like the fireman or the post office man. I'm talking about working for the state, okay? Like in a very big way, and were required to be silent and mysterious about their lives. Again, Kenneth Harris moved to New York and then virtually disappeared and lost contact with everything, also exceedingly private. And I should be able to find his naturalization papers. I should be able to find way more about him, considering he moved to America and lives in America. And I keep coming up dry. So I am asking everyone who has been on this journey to get on this. This photo of Lady Idris Allen. Her name was Idris Trotman. She married the finance minister of Bustamante. Like Beryl, this woman died in 1995 in Jamaica. She was exceedingly devoted to politics, and she ran a dry goods store and was a supporter, like I said, of Bustamante. The reason why she's been a person of interest to me is that she just kind of fits the bill of everything that Donald Harris speaks about in his Jamaican Online Global piece about his heritage, the dry goods store. It's almost like he's merged different people. And I also think that that woman looks like a light-skinned woman that could be mixed. And so I just am deeming her a person of interest, trying to learn more about her. I just think the more public we are with this research, the more we will be able to discern what is right and what is wrong. She may have no relation whatsoever, but just when I think of this woman saying she looked like Kamala, I see the skin complexion, I see black hair, and I find her to be interesting. I don't know if I am the only person in the world who didn't know this. I can't imagine how I didn't know this. Actually, I can. The mainstream media doesn't do its job, but I was getting all these emails. People were furious with me when I said, like, I didn't believe that Michelle Obama was trans. I just never looked into it. There was nothing that, totally different from the Emmanuel Brigitte Macron thing, where like this journalist for 3 years while being harassed by the French Secret Service, dug into the past, produced the documents, proved that Brigitte Macron lived as a man. And I just don't remember that being a thing. And then people were going, well, what about his trans nanny? And I'm going, what conspiracy is this? And then they start sending me like mainstream media having covered this. And I'm going, what have I been under a rock? Barack Obama had a trans nanny growing up. Okay, so back in 2012, the Associated Press interviewed Evie. This is Evie, by the way, not dressed as a woman, but Evie, whatever. Let's just throw it to a clip and let you watch.
66-year-old Evie walks the streets of her Indonesian slum. She lives in a tiny room, subsisting on money she earns from washing clothes. Evie's meager existence belies a startling truth. She was once nanny to President Barack Obama. Evie says she's always been proud that the person she cared for, drove to school, and cooked for ended up being #1 in the world. The future president was just 8 years old at the time. In the late 1960s, his mother, Ann Dunham, married her second husband and moved to Indonesia. Dunham was impressed by Evie's cooking ability and offered her a job. For 2 years, Evie lived with Obama and his family in this Jakarta home, but she thinks the young Obama didn't know one fundamental truth about her. Born a man, Evie identifies as a woman. Evie says Ann Dunham might have known she was transgendered, but she never dressed as a woman in front of young Barry. And it was a time of brutal dictatorship, when soldiers would beat and round up so-called banshees. Evie says soldiers once shaved off her long black hair and burned her with lit cigarettes. Even today, transgendered people have a difficult time in this largely Muslim nation of 240 million people. This representative of an influential Islamic group says transgendered people are wrong, and they deny the teachings of Islam. And so, Evie has struggled through life, saying she's never found suitable work since Obama and his family left the country in the early 1970s, but she says Obama's election gave her a reason to feel proud for the first time in a long time.
Okay, so elsewhere in the AP's investigation, Evie said this. This is, again, directly from the AP article. He was so young, that's referring to Barry Soetoro, and I never let him see me wearing women's clothes, but he did see me trying on his mother's lipstick sometimes. That used to really crack him up. Then, elsewhere in the piece, they confirm that neighbors of Barry Soetoro and Dunham dispute Evie's claims and say that Evie wasn't just wearing lipstick, but did in fact leave the house wearing female clothes. Here is a photo of Evie, by the way, fully dressed up. I'm speechless, I think. What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? You know, Evie apparently was very much accepted as a transgender individual by Stanley Dunham, Barack Obama's mother, so much so that she allowed Evie to wear her lipstick, allowed Evie to be around her child wearing her lipstick. And if the neighbors are telling the truth, which I feel like they are, Evie was dressed as a woman around a young Barry Soetoro. Okay, so why am I bringing this up? Well, first and foremost, because it's insane. Secondly, because it's a little too much synergy, as I said at the top of the show, between the mysterious upbringing of Emmanuel Macron, okay, and Barack Obama. Just like, for whatever reason, they're entered into these Catholic schools when they're really young, and they have this extraordinarily close relationships with their grandparents, like Emmanuel Macron, the exact same thing. This sort of introduction to transgenderism at an incredibly young age, the entire mainstream media sort of colluding to cover their tracks. What the hell is going on? What's going on? I'm going to ask you guys, seriously, what is going on? Because it's starting to look to me like a program, like a global government program, which potentially is breeding world leaders in very disgusting ways, exposing them to things that they probably should not be exposed to when they're young. I got to be very, very careful when I'm talking about this, because we're talking about a topic of transgenderism. We're talking about Brigitte Macron, who was born a man. If you are at all shocked to hear this, just know that of all of the episodes that YouTube decided to completely remove, it was my interview with the journalist. You should go pursue that. That broke the story about Brigitte Macron. I mean, it's as legit as it gets. Like, take it to the bank. Brigitte Macron was born a man named Michel Trogneau. And I am just seeing, like I said, a little bit too much synergy between all of these leaders and their shady backgrounds, you know, their parents, these broken homes. It leads me to my recent research, which, if it was so crazy, I don't know why the media freaked out about me drawing attention to the fact that there were all of these elite sex cults. and people that believed in pedophilia as sacraments. I talked about Frankism. I talked about Jacob Frank. I recommended books for people to read to learn about that, and just mysteriously how they've tried to erase this from history. And I've talked about this for a reason, because you're talking about a religious sex cult or an anti-religious sex cult that believed in breeding and incest and things of this nature. This is a fact of history. And the media got really angry when I shared the fact that this cult, this religion, Frankism, made it all the way to America. It is just an inescapable fact that Louis Brandeis, the Supreme Court justice, who blackmailed himself into the Supreme Court, used blackmail to get onto the Supreme Court, was a Frankist. It's just a fact. You can't just make that go away. What does that signal to you? What is actually happening right now? It's very challenging, I think, for a lot of people to recognize. I know people are reading the Chaos book, learning about the MK Ultra program, learning about the extent that your government will go through to lie and to issue mass psychoses and to change the way fundamentally that you think. I know it's a very challenging thing to kind of have, I guess, your fabric of reality become unwoven, but I think it's really necessary for people to come to terms with the kind of evil that we are getting close to here.
I would like to know how you all feel about this situation, and while you are letting me know, could you please like and share this video and subscribe to Geneva's Closet if you haven't already done so right here on YouTube. And you can follow me on Facebook at Geneva's Closet, and you can email me at genevascloset22@gmail.com. You all have a fabulous day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.